So I see a lot of 3s and 4s. And then everyone choose between 1 and 2. Show me. Show me. I think that was more 1s than 2s. It was like almost half and half, but okay. So 1, 3, and 4 are the ones we're doing, yes. Okay. For number 1, the rate of change, if you don't remember your shark bite things, any of this, look back in your notes, ask anyone else. The formulas might be still up on the board, like the slope formula is still up on the board, or it'll be up on the word wall. So be looking at one of those places. We have to find our slope using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You don't need to write that part down, you can if you want. So I'm labeling just because I'm a visual person, it helps me see. You don't need to label that. And then I would put those into my formula, -5 minus a -5 over 2 minus 3. The minus negative would become a plus, so you could rewrite that or just go into simplifying. This would become a -1. So the slope would be, sorry, I didn't mean to put 0 there. 0 over -1, or just 0. That would be our answer for 1. Yes?
Why would you put just 0 instead of just -1?
In your calculator, do 0 divided by -1. It's not impossible. Other questions on that one?
So how did it change like 0 when the rest of it
Yes. So for number 3, we're looking at the y-intercept change from -2 to 3. Describe what happened to the slope and the y-intercept. Well, the slope didn't change. The y-intercept was up, so it shifted up. And that's it. But make sure you have both things written, the slope and the y-intercept. Questions on that one? Yes. Because it starts at -2, and to get to 3, we go -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. For the domain of this, we're looking, where does that start? Where does that end? It has a starting and stopping point. So we're going to write that in our set notation. Curly brackets, x line. The starting point, the least or furthest point to the left is -3, is less than or equal to x, is less than or equal to 1. And then our range is similar, starting and stopping points, but lowest to highest. So it'll start off similarly, except with y. But it starts at 1, less than or equal to y, less than or equal to 3. Make sure you have both of those. Questions on that? Stop. So for this, 1, 2, you're right, it's 4. Thank you. Also said that in second period and no one corrected it anyway. Any other questions about that? Make sure your name is on your shark bite answer sheet. pass it to the table in front of you and keep passing it to the front, and then I'll collect it at the front. Unless you're over here, then you guys can put it in. Alright, so last class we talked about how to write equations from a graph, different ways to do that. Today we're going to get into the algebraic part of that. So this part we should recognize because we've done this before. Writing this in slope-intercept form, which is what? Y equals mx plus b. Good. Where m is the slope and b is the So if we're given the slope and y-intercept, we should be able to put those into our y equals mx plus b. So how would I write number 1?
Y equals 2x plus minus 1 is minus 1.
Okay. Now, 2 through 6 will be similar. Are there any in 2 through 6 on this side that we want to see you go over before we go on to the next part? If not, we're going to go on to the right side. Yes.
For number 5, it would just be y equals
X.
4x. You wouldn't use a 0.
You don't have to. You can if you want to. Okay. Now, the right side, we're going to use our standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. We've used this to find our intercepts before. But now we're going to use it to take our equation from standard form into slope-intercept form. Do you have these notes?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you found insights.
So in this, we're going to take what we did with literal equations, solve for a variable. In this, we're always going to solve for y. So we're going to solve this for y and get it back into our slope-intercept form. So in number 1, if I was trying to get y by itself, what would I do first there? How would I get that y by itself? 1. Not divided. We're subtracting 2x to the other side. So we have y equals, I'm going to write this as is first, because that's what we would have done in literal. But because we want it in slope-intercept form, we're going to switch the 3 and the negative 2x. So that this is now in y equals mx plus b. Whether you switch that at the end or first does not matter. But these are the same equation. If I were to graph them both, they would overlap. But this is in standard form and this is in our slope-intercept form. Yes.
What do you mean by we use the standard form?
Because I have it.
Say that again.
Guys,
Guys, stop talking, please. We've used it to find intercepts before, yes. So it looked just like this. And we put zeros in to find intercepts, but that's not what we're doing here. Yes.
with the ax plus by equals c, are you always like gonna switch it since you switched?
Yes. We're kind of going to always start off the same way and then always switch it at the end or before that.
Does it matter when you switch it?
As long as you get there eventually. Did you have a question, Gianna? Because you look confused. That's why I'm asking. Okay, Brennan.
How do you get from 3 minus 2x to 2x plus 3?
We just switched it. So we can do that because we're not breaking any math laws. The signs are still the same. This is still positive 3. This is still negative 2x. I didn't add or subtract anything. I just switched them. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, we're going to refer back to that, right? That ax plus b.
Yeah. So these are all in this form. Okay. So we're going to try example 2. Again, we're trying to get y by itself. What would be our first step? Minus 4x on both sides. we're always going to get rid of that x term first. I'm going to go ahead and switch these now, so I don't have to worry about doing that later. So put the x term first, then the number. If you want to leave it as is and then switch it later, you can do that. Then how would we get y by itself? Divide everything by 5, so that everything simplifies. Or some of it simplifies. So this becomes just y. This just stays the fraction. And this would become negative 6. So that is our equation in y equals mx plus b. We're converting it from this to this.
Oh.
Yes.
If we have to simplify,
Hold on.
we just divide it by
Say that one more time.
If we couldn't simplify it, how would we write it?
If we could simplify it.
We couldn't.
If we couldn't. So
Like when we're doing this.
you have to get rid of this regardless. You need to divide everything separately regardless to get your slope and then your y.
So even if you can't simplify it, you
Yes, because then you'll just have 2 fractions, but that's fine. What was your question?
how is that something
Other questions before we do another? Okay. So look at questions 3, 4, 5, and 6. Which of those would you like to see together, do together, before I let you try one on your own?
Doesn't matter what we do again. We do like minus 5y, minus 5y, or
That wouldn't be getting y by itself.
yeah.
Sure. So in number 4, what would be our first step? Minus 1x, so just subtract x. I'm going to go ahead and switch the order so it's negative x minus 8. And then to get y by itself? Not by y, by negative 1. Because it's an invisible 1 in front of it. So divide by negative 1. So that this becomes positive x or positive 1x, and then positive 8. In Desmos, you know how to put equations in. If you wanted to double check yourself in Desmos, you would put in the original, put in this, and see if they overlap. In the calculator, you would have to solve it and see if you put this in, would that graph the same. But if you're graphing something in the calculator, go into y equals and type this in. Type in whatever, so I can type in negative x, positive x. We'll see. And hit graph, and it'll graph it for you. Okay, I want you to try number 6. Try number 6, and then we will go to number 6 on the board. Work and answer on the board.
You're good.
You may have switched yours at the end, but you should have still gotten the same answer. Subtracting 3x on both sides, dividing everything by negative 2 to get 3 over 2x minus 7. Questions about that? Cool, we're going to take it up a notch. Go to the next page. So what we just did was converting standard form to slope-intercept form. Now we're going to have to write equations when we're given slope at a point. And the easiest format to do that in is your point-slope formula. So write this down. Y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1 parentheses. This formula you will need to remember.
x1 minus x minus x1. Yeah.
So in this formula, the y and the x are just variables. Y and x are just variables. M is still your slope. y1 and x1 refer to your points. So we're going to try this. I'm going to rewrite that just so you remember what it looks like. This is also over on the board in pink and blue. So in this would be your x1, y1, and m. And then I'm just going to take each of those numbers and put it into the formula. So that would be y minus, we're always subtracting, our y1 is 1, equals our slope, our m3, parentheses x minus our x1, which is 2. After we put it in this format, now we're going to solve it to get y by itself.
How would you know that it would be like, because you know how in the parentheses is x minus x?
X minus x1.
X1. Then how would you know where the 2 would be? How come it wouldn't be the first x?
X is always just x. x1 is the point. Okay, so to solve this, what do you think the first step would be? Now I'm adding those 3. Yes. The 3 to both of these. You guys should probably stop talking and listen. That's why you can't hear. To get y by itself, what would be the next step? Yes. Add 1 to both sides. So that we get our y equals mx plus b. Y equals 3x minus y. Questions on that before we do another? We're going to skip 2 and move on to 3 just so I can show you what happens when you have a negative number. Same process though. x1, y1, m. Put those numbers into that format. So this is y minus a negative 7. It will change to a plus in a second. Equals negative 1 times x minus 4. So, yes.
You have to write like that. Could we do it automatically?
You could automatically change this to a plus, but don't change that for everything. Don't get in the mindset of just putting in plus, unless you see 2 negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and change this, but if you started off writing that as a plus, that's fine. I can change this to a plus and distribute at the same time. But if I had a negative, 2 negatives inside the parentheses, I would have to change that to a plus before I could distribute. I could not distribute before I changed that. Okay, so when I subtract 7 on both sides, what is that equation? Negative 1x plus 3. There we go. Oh, yes, it would be a negative 3 because you're subtracting. Thank you. Okay. Questions about that? Okay, we're going to do number 6 just so you see what happens when you have fractions. Yes. Okay, so same process. You can label them if that helps. So this would be y minus 4 equals negative 3/4, parentheses x minus 6. Now when we distribute that negative 3/4, we're going to end up with a fraction. Or 2, I should say. What would that fraction be? Multiply negative 3/4 and negative 6. Either in the calculator, in your head,
algebraically out.
What would you say? 4.5 is the decimal. What would the fraction be? I'm only keeping this as a fraction because I don't want a fraction and then a decimal, then a whole number, and then that gets confusing. So then when I add 4 to that fraction, what would that become? Yes. So you said that? Is that what you said? So sometimes you have fractions for both the slope and the y-intercept. It depends on the problem. Did you do that in your calculator? No. Did you do that in your calculator? You did that in your head. Okay. So if you were doing it in your calculator, it would give you that. Or you could change that to a fraction. This is really over 1. Multiply this by 2 and that by 2. And then add. So this would be 17. That would stay the same. You get 17. Or you can use your calculator. Okay, I want you to try number 2. Still up here. We haven't touched on here. So number 2 up here. Okay. Like Layla did, you should have set this up. Y minus 2 equals 1/2, parentheses, x minus 4, parentheses. And then distributed the 1/2 to get 1/2 x minus 2 on the right. Added 2 on both sides to get y equals 1/2 x, or you can put the plus 0. Yes. Yes. Questions on that one? Yes. The 1/2 was given to us. Oh. Okay, in the bottom section, similar but different, it's hanging up. We now have 2 points. So before we can do that process that we were just doing, we have to find the slope first, using your slope formula. Your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to do that first. Then we're going to use the same process that we were just doing. So label them if you need to. This would be 4 minus 1 over 2 minus 3, which is negative what? Not negative 1. It is negative. Negative 1 in the denominator, yes.
Does it matter if you put the 1 minus 4, or does it have to be 4 minus 1?
It doesn't matter as long as you also do 3 minus 2 instead.
So it has, they
So
both have to
you just have to switch them both, yes. Okay, so once you find your slope, then we're going to do the same thing we just did. Saeed, did you go to the bathroom? Okay. It does not matter which point you choose, so I'm going to split you up so that you both can try this. You 4 tables, I want you to try the previous point slope with the slope given and the 3 and 1. And then you 5 tables are going to do the same thing but with the second point, 2, 4. So 2, 4, 3, 1, try that. This process, but with the specific point I gave you. Tess and Karina for doing that. So it does not matter which point you choose, whether you choose the first or the second, you get the same thing. So don't do both, pick one, and you should be getting the same answer regardless. You could, as a way to check yourself, try the other one to see, did I get the same thing? But the issue with that is you could make mistakes in the second one and think the first one is wrong, or vice versa. So be mindful of that. Questions on that before we move on? Yes.
So if I always wanted to, I could always use this
Mhm.
x1.
The point source is what you're talking about? Yes.
Oh,
For Alright, I'm going to show you just a few more things and then you guys are going to have time to practice. Let's look at number 4. It's written over, but I'm just going to rewrite it. Okay. Similar to what we just did, let's find the slope. y2 minus y1, x2 over x1. What is your slope? It's -1, sorry. What is that slope? 5/1 or just 5. Now, before we keep going, does anything stand out about these 2 points? One has a 0. That usually means there's an intercept. What type of intercept is this? A y-intercept. So if you are given a y-intercept, you don't have to do the rest of this work. You have the points you need to make your equation.
So you know it's the y-intercept and this is 0.
In the x place.
In the x-place. Oh.
So if I had done 3, this is an x-intercept, so that would not work. I could not just say -7 is my y-intercept and go on from there. But in 5, I could. So you could always keep doing the work, but you don't have to if you're given the y-intercept. Okay, on the next page, I just want to show you something you might see. On number 4 and number 7. Small, big. Okay, so in number 4, if I have one, this is like the type where I just put the 2 together, write the equation. But if I have a slope that's a 0, alarm should go off, bell should go off, that this is going to be a Hoyle situation. Which type of equation would this be? So horizontal, or your y equals. Now, you could start off your y equals mx+b by putting 0x minus 2, but that cannot be your final answer because 0x doesn't make sense, so it's just be 0. So your final answer there would have to be just y equals a number.
So there can't be 0.
You can't have 0x. You can't have 0x, because that would just be 0. Okay, yes. Now, if it said undefined, very similar to number 7, you would do the following. So in this is very much like what we were just doing. You're given a point, you're given a slope. But if slope is undefined, what type of equation or line is that?
Close.
Okay, which means
Vertical.
line is an x equals. If you have an undefined slope, you cannot do the work for this. We can't put undefined into the equation, it doesn't work. But I can look at the x value and write that as my answer. There's no work to be done. You have to remember your Hoyle-bucks. If this said slope is 0, you could do the same thing, but with y, or you could put 0 into the formula. You just can't put undefined into the formula. Okay, questions on that before you guys practice? And I need your opinion. Yeah.
Wait, so if it was 0, I would just solve it using
The point slope form, or the same way, y equals whatever the y value is. Okay. Because I'm trying to get all of the advanced algebra 1 classes' opinion on this, and then once I get third periods tomorrow, then I'll change or not. For Delta Math, currently right now you go into the assignments to find the assignments. Would you like to keep doing that or see them all in the side link on the Delta Math page? So there's a side link on the Canvas page. So those for a side link, raise your hand.
What's the sign?
Okay, that looks like majority. So right now it's 2 out of 3 classes, but I still want to see what third period says before I change it because it would change for everybody. Today you're still going to go through the assignment because I haven't changed it yet. But you guys have 2 Delta Maths that are due on Friday. Writing linear equations part 1, which is the graph stuff, and part 2, which is what we did today. Work on those, and then afterwards you can work on tests if you need to finish them or retake work.